Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Johnson Financial Group, helping customers build financial plans around their unique goals for over 55 years. More at johnsonfinancialgroup.com. Johnson Bank and Johnson Wealth Inc. are Johnson Financial Group companies.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Here's one of our favorite conversations about the people, places, and organizations that shape Milwaukee.
Milwaukee is fortunate to have some historic movie theaters still in operation, from the Oriental and Downer on the city's east side to the Avalon in Bayview. But the city was once home to many lavish movie palaces, with seats for thousands of moviegoers. For decades, these theaters lined the streets of downtown Milwaukee, but now only a few remain. To learn more about the rise and fall of Milwaukee's movie palaces, I'm joined by historian Matthew Prigge, who wrote about it for this month's Milwaukee Magazine. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
How would you describe the kinds of movie palaces of the 1920s? What did they look like?
Well, they were really a luxury in movie going that's kind of unimaginable today. We've got some beautiful theaters here in the Avalon and the Oriental, things that we would today consider movie palaces, but really those were just couldn't compare to the real glamorous palaces that once existed here in downtown Milwaukee. They were very grandiose. There was really no detail spared in designing these places. Marble in the lobbies, very nice staircases, the furnishings, the draperies on the walls, everything was designed to be very, very plush and a very, engaging environment. There's art on the walls, there's murals, there's fountains in some of these theaters. Some of them, the old Princess Theater on 3rd Street, when it first opened, it had birds in gilded cages. I mean, everything was really designed to uplift the movie-going experience and to put it on. I mean, the original goal with all this was to kind of legitimize movie-going and put it on par with something like, seeing a stage play or something like that. So it was all designed for luxury.
Yeah, as you alluded to, movies at this time were still relatively new. This was something that they were introducing to American audiences. What was it like watching movies in a movie palace versus the spaces that people would have watched silent films in originally?
Yeah, the very first movie theaters they weren't really built as movie theaters. They're mostly like storefronts. You basically had a big open space that you could line some chairs up in, on a flat floor, no grade to it. So everybody was lined up. Everybody's packed in very tight, and there's, in some cases, just a sheet on the wall, or maybe the wall was painted white. So it was very rustic. It didn't really feel like you had gone anyplace. You're just in a room where a movie was being showed. But by the time purpose-built theaters start coming around, I mean, these are, if you consider the Riverside downtown, or maybe the Pabst Theater, a lot of people have been to those places. It was something that, transformed from something where you'd sit in a room with a few hundred people maybe to something where you could be in this actual space designed for showing movies, with maybe a few thousand other people. So the idea of going to the movies, of going to a space that had this aura to it, to watch a movie, that all came out of these first purpose-built theaters, which quickly evolved into movie palaces.
Interesting. You've mentioned a couple of the older movie theaters that we have here in Milwaukee, including the Oriental. But as you mentioned, that was not considered maybe the kind of movie palace that would have been really showy in the 1920s. What were some of the more elaborate movie palaces that we had here in the city?
Yeah, the real gem, I think, would have been the Wisconsin, which was on 5th and Wisconsin. That was the building's no longer there. It's where that blue federal building is now. That opened up, I think, in 1924, and that was, it was such an event when this theater opened. I mean, they actually had a parade down Wisconsin Avenue, just with people, citizens, and people, civic boosters, that kind of thing. It was kind of like the opening of a new sports stadium or something like that. It was, it was considered a point of civic pride that one of these things existed. So certainly, the Wisconsin, that one sat over 3,000 people. The Warner, which is of course still around today, came around in the early 30s. That was a little late, kind of very tail end of the movie palace boom. But there was also the Alhambra, which was an older stage theater, which was a very large, very ornate theater that showed movies for a long time. And really the one that kind of spans the whole progression of movie exhibition downtown to be the Princess Theater, which is on 3rd Street, which opened up or was renovated in 1909, really to be the first rate picture house, the term they'd use at the time, but was kind of a precursor of the the movie palace concept, but definitely a very upscale, ornate, very clean building that was again meant to legitimize motion pictures.
As you mentioned, the construction of these movie palaces began to taper off toward the end of the 20s, certainly into the 30s. And of course, we have the Great Depression in the 1930s. Movies became very important during that time. A lot of people found kind of an escape in these movie palaces. But as they aged, what happened to these spaces?
Well, a lot of, and you're right, by the Warner, I think opens up in 31 or 32, and that's really not just in Milwaukee, but really nationally, kind of like the end of theater construction for a long time. Some of the, more minor theaters started to close in the 30s just because there was, a huge saturation for so many movie seats in downtown that some things were bound to kind of fall off. But a lot of the big ones, the theaters that I'd mentioned, they stayed open through the end of the war, World War II. With the return to peacetime, you see a huge surge in movie going. Really, the peak of movie going happens, that year or so right after the end of the war. But then it falls off really quickly. You start to see a lot of these places hit hard times. Fewer people are going downtown. More people are moving to the suburbs. And into a lot of these places are still open into the 60s and 70s in downtown, but they're showing different kinds of movies now. They're showing more exploitation films. Eventually, by the late 60s into the early 70s, a lot of these places are showing adult films. By the early 70s, about half of the theaters in downtown Milwaukee are either occasionally or full-time showing sex films.
What ends up being really the death knell for the movie palaces? Is it, the fact that they are now showing pornography, or do the buildings just deteriorate?
I mean, it's a combination of a lot of things. And the idea of a lot of these theaters, they got a lot of their money from showing movies during the day. A lot of them opened, in the morning, relying on downtown foot traffic for shopping. And by, the 60s into the 70s, that's pretty much, that is starting to taper off as well. People are still going, just kind of happening to go see a movie, but now there's, mall theaters. That's where a lot of people are doing their shopping now, is shopping malls, designated shopping areas like that on the, more periphery of the city. Less people think of downtown as a place to go see a movie. That the buildings are in rough shape. They reduced their seating capacity by the 60s or 70s. You can't sell 3,000 tickets to a movie anymore. And plus changing, how people conceive of downtown, that's changed. So it's a lot of factors that contribute to this. And by the 70s, there's only a few of them that are still open. There's a few more that shut their doors in the 80s. And by the 90s, you really only got the Warner, or at that time it was being called the Grand. That's really the last one standing in downtown, and then that closes in, I think, 1994.
What ended up happening to the Princess?
It was resilient for what it was showing. By the 80s, it was showing hardcore pornography, and it had a loyal clientele base, like loyal enough to keep it open. But one of the by the early 80s, you see a lot of efforts to try to revitalize downtown. Of course, the Grand Avenue Mall opens up at that time. One of the compromises with the Princess and the city and the mall was that after the mall opened, the Princess stopped putting the titles of their movies on the marquee. It just said, like call for show times or something like that. But that's, I think they lasted until 86, and then the city condemned the building, and they were preservationists were making some kind of effort to preserve the building historically, and the city before they would potentially face any, legal restrictions on the property from that effort, they just punched a hole in the side of the building with some kind of front end loader or something like that, and rendered it unfit and tore it down.
The Warner Theater has found a new life with the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. If you go inside, you can see, of course, a lot of the original artwork that was featured on the walls. The space is really an homage to what it would have been originally. They restored it quite lovingly. As we think of what's been now more than 100 years, I suppose, since the movie palaces were first opened, what do you see as their legacy here in the city?
Well, I think the legacy is really part of this idea of downtown and what people once thought of downtown as a place where this was really the commercial heart of the city. It's where you went shopping. It's where if you wanted to buy a really nice suit, you once had to go downtown to one of the stores here. If you wanted to see whatever big band leader that was coming through town, it was downtown. And with the movies too, like the way the movie business was set up, when a new movie came out, it was downtown. You couldn't see it in your neighborhood. A theater like the Oriental back in the 20s and 30s, a movie had to be out a few months before it would show up there. So really, if anything, if you want to kind of experience what was going on, culturally or economically, you had to be downtown, and that idea is sort of forgotten today. But, at one time, everything was downtown. So I think the movie palace era kind of represents that.
It was the place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect and sharing your work.
Oh, of course. Thanks.
Matthew Prigge is a local historian and librarian at Marquette University. His piece on Milwaukee's movie palaces was featured in this month's Milwaukee Magazine.
Lake Effect is a daily talk show on WUWM, Milwaukee's local NPR station. It's a show where we share the stories about the people, places, and organizations that shape the city. If you enjoyed this episode of Lake Effect Spotlight, subscribe to the podcast. You can find all of Lake Effect's conversations at wuwm.com/Lake Effect, and we're on the radio Monday through Friday at noon on 89.7.
This is Tanya Mosley, co-host of Fresh Air. You'll see your favorite actors, directors, and comedians on late-night TV shows or YouTube. But what you get with Fresh Air is a deep dive. Spend some quality time with people like Billie Eilish, Questlove, Ariana Grande, Stephen Colbert, and so many more. We ask questions you won't hear asked anywhere else. Listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.